You say I make you nervous, a tragedy, I'm a beautiful
BTS news today. Seoul trembles, not from an earthquake, but from Jungkook's voice that finally broke the silence. Seoul trembled today, not from an earthquake, but from a single voice that finally broke through a long, suffocating silence. A voice that had been buried under pressure, mystery, and unbearable restraint. That voice was Jungkook's, the golden magne of BTS. But this wasn't a song. It wasn't a sweet letter to fans on social media. It was a trembling confession that made the world stop for a moment and brought tears to thousands of armies around the globe. It began on what seemed like an ordinary afternoon. A Weverse live broadcast flickered to life, showing Jungkook in his simple room. No stage lights, no dramatic setup, just the soft sunset casting shadows through the window, and an acoustic guitar resting against his knee. But no song came. There was no cheerful melody. Instead, only the sound of a deep breath and an empty stare met the viewers. "I need to say something today," Jungkook said quietly, barely audible, as if trying to contain a storm inside his chest. And it's not going to be easy. Within seconds, Weverse was flooded with hundreds of thousands of worried comments and emojis. Fans knew, when Jungkook starts like that, something monumental is coming. And they were right. Jungkook took a deep breath, eyes swollen with emotion, and began peeling away the layers of silence that had been wrapped around him. He never mentioned any names directly, but every word he said ignited years of speculation that had only ever been whispered among the loyal. "I've kept this to myself for a long time. Not because I was afraid, but because I thought the time wasn't right. But now, I can't stay silent anymore." Silence filled the room again. Only the sound of a fan buzzed faintly in the background. He looked down briefly before continuing. "In the past few months, many things have happened. I've been through a lot, and not all of it could be helped by my team or even my own family. There's a side of my life as an artist that's been hidden, not just by me, but by the system that built me." His eyes were sharp, yet wounded. He continued, "I've wanted to speak out several times, but I was always told to wait. They said it wasn't the right time, that the public wasn't ready, that it might disrupt important projects already in motion. But what about me? Do I have to keep holding it all in just because of a schedule?" Comments poured in. "What do you mean, Jungkook? Does HYBE know? You're not alone. We're here." But Jungkook stayed silent for a few more seconds, then dropped the bombshell. "HYBE knows. And they chose to hide it." The world fell silent. Even the most suspicious fans never expected Jungkook to say it out loud. That the company he had called his family since his teenage years was part of the burden he carried. He never said the word conflict, but the pain in his voice spoke louder than any term. "I asked for a break. Just some time to be human. To breathe without a camera in my face, without people placing expectations on me every second. But I was given just 1 week. And even during that time, I had to submit content, maintain my image. Am I a machine?" Bitterness tinged his voice. But he never blamed ARMY. In fact, he repeatedly said, "You're the only reason I'm still here. I'm still breathing because of your love." An hour after the live, hashtags like #WeYouJungkook and #HWillBeExplained skyrocketed to the #1 trend in many countries. Armies united, not just to support him, but to uncover what had been hidden all this time. HYBE made no immediate statement. But sharp-eyed fans began digging through archives, reviewing old moments that once seemed normal, but now, under a new light, looked suspicious. The delayed solo tour. Jimin's sudden disappearance from several key events, just when rumors of a Jungkook collaboration were heating up. Suddenly, it all seemed to connect. Was it mental health? Internal pressure? Or something far deeper than the public had ever imagined? Shortly after the live, Jungkook posted a black and white photo on Instagram. It wasn't his face, nor a BTS image. Just his hand gripping a crumpled note that read, "I'm not a brand. I'm a human. JK." That single sentence shook the entire entertainment industry, especially the K-pop world, notorious for its militaristic schedules and suffocating standards. Cultural commentators began to speak up. Even several retired idols subtly voiced support through their personal accounts. The world was uniting behind one voice. Listen to Jungkook, a former BTS production staff member, whose identity remains anonymous for safety, appeared on a Korean entertainment forum and said, "I know what he means." Jungkook has asked for breaks multiple times, but HYBE's schedule was too full. Even when he was sick, he was still pushed to perform, for the sake of sponsors. That night, Seoul felt eerily quiet, but the screens of millions around the world glowed with the image of one man who had finally dared to challenge the system that raised him. Jungkook, once seen as HYBE's golden child, had become the first to speak out publicly, shattering the pristine narrative they had always portrayed. But this wasn't the end. In his closing words, Jungkook said, "I don't know what will happen after this. Maybe there will be consequences. But at least this time, I'm speaking not as an idol, but as John Jungkook." Suddenly, a door opened quietly in the background. The camera was still rolling. A small figure in a black hoodie walked in silently. Jungkook smiled faintly and said, "You came." That voice, instantly recognized, replied, "I'm always here," as Jimin sat beside him. There were no long explanations, just a glance between two friends who had clearly weathered storms together. Sitting side by side in the middle of the storm, they remained unshaken. The next day, HYBE released a short, sterile statement. "We are reviewing Jungkook's statement. We asked the public not to spread excessive speculation until the facts are clear." But it was too late. The world had already heard him. And this time, Jungkook's voice could not be silenced, because the truth, no matter how painful, is the beginning of something bigger. And maybe this is the start of a new chapter, not just for Jungkook, not just for BTS, but for the entire industry that forces stars to shine endlessly, even when all they want is to simply be human. The next morning, a gentle rain fell over Seoul. But it wasn't the rain that drew the attention of journalists, editors, and crisis managers. No, the HYBE headquarters buzzed with tension, not because of comeback schedules or album launches, but because the world no longer blindly believed. And it all started with one person, John Jungkook. His live broadcast had gone global, not just within ARMY circles, but across the entertainment world. Major outlets like Billboard, Rolling Stone, and Time put Jungkook on their front pages with headlines like, "Magne of BTS breaks the silence. Jungkook calls out the industry that raised him." And the most striking of all, "I am not a brand." Jungkook's words shake K-pop. Inside HYBE, emergency meetings were held. Rumors swirled that the board was divided. Some pushed for a public apology. Others insisted Jungkook remain silent to stop things from spiraling, but it was all in vain. That night, an anonymous Twitter account, believed by some ARMY to belong to a former HYBE senior staff, leaked a screenshot of an internal email chain. It revealed that Jungkook's request for a break had been postponed repeatedly over 6 months. One shocking line from the email read, "If he leaves now, we lose momentum." Momentum? For what? For who? The questions hung in the air like thunderclouds. Meanwhile, Jungkook disappeared from the public eye. No Instagram updates. No appearances at his old apartment. But his silence didn't erase him. It only fueled the movement further. New hashtags emerged daily. Hashtag Protect Jungkook. Hashtag We Stand With JK. Hashtag Jungkook Unbreakable. Yes, many believe that Jimin was the only one truly standing by his side through it all.
Oh.